Okay, welcome everybody to this episode from the Inclusion Club. It's my great pleasure indeed to introduce you to Matt Schinelli from New Jersey All People Equal. How do you go, Matt?
Hey Peter, how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm good, thanks. Now, there are a million things I could talk to Matt about, and no doubt we'll do future episodes with Matt and look closely at what New Jersey All People Equal do. But today I want to pick up on a particular subject around creativity in adapting and modifying for individual difference. And me and Matt have already had a couple of conversations around this, and I thought it would make a really good episode. Now, Matt, um, I'm going to read you the Wikipedia, which is the font of all knowledge, definition of creativity. Yeah,
Right.
I picked it off this morning. It says creativity refers to the phenomenon whereby something new is created which has some kind of subjective value, such as a joke, a literary work, a painting, or musical composition. It's also the qualitative impetus behind any given act of creation, and it's generally perceived to be associated with intelligence and cognition.
Mm.
Now, it's a bit of a long definition, but I'm really interested to hear and to chat to you about how creative do we need to be, and how is it that some people are more creative than others when it comes to looking at adapting and modifying activities in sports for people with disabilities? Sometimes you need to be creative in doing that. Now, you might have some examples, or you might have an idea of where that comes from, and how important is it to be creative?
Well, Peter, I think that you've hit upon a very important theme that is often overlooked by professionals. Creativity is, I think the essential or the missing link of really success long term for inclusion. So many people are confused or have some type of a muddied perspective on what inclusion is. And as a general rule of thumb, I think most people perceive it as all people doing the same thing at the same time in the same way. And so that greatly limits the amount of creativity that can be put into play. As experienced physical education teachers or any individual that's worked with sports before, they know that ultimately the goal of the task is what you're trying to achieve. For example, if basketball, the goal of the task is to take a ball from one place to bring it to another area and to put it through some type of a cylinder or some type of a basket. So I think as the average coach, the average physical education teacher, follows the strict guidelines of the game as it's perceived on television or in a formal league. But I think that that really lends itself to failure of creativity. So creativity to me is something that expands the richness of the game. It does change the nature of how it's played, but doesn't necessarily change the outcome of what the purpose of the game is supposed to achieve.
So it's really, isn't it, if you can view the outcome of what you're trying to achieve and say what is the most inclusive way of getting there. The rules and regulations kind of get in the way of all that, don't they? They can be really restrictive for people and their creativity, particularly if you're a trained sports coach or physical education. You've trained a certain way, so things are done a certain way, and it's sometimes difficult for people to see how do we get to this end point, and what are the different adaptations and modifications to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, that's exactly it. I think that the trained physical education teacher or athletic coach sees things on the highest level, at least in the television version of it all, the NBA or your professional, sporting leagues. But if you look a little deeper and you pull back really where the majority of the skill development occurs, which is, off stage, behind the cameras, in practices, you see that coaches and really very skilled technicians create more opportunities for creativity. They actually open the game up to where it includes things that are not part of the traditional game so that they can draw upon individual strengths and they can stimulate the teams to work in a more collective process. So an example of this might be again, a basketball clinic or a basketball professional league. You'd see a practice where there would be all of these devices or challenges or obstacles that are part of the game scenario. Well, that's not part of regular play as you see on television, but in that practice environment, the coaches have determined that by scaling up or down, by allowing there to be, more creativity in how they challenge the player, they're able to bring out more of that player's inner strength. And so I think if more coaches, if more people saw practices instead of the end product, overall creativity would be embraced in a much larger way.
That's a very good point, isn't it? That the creativity is in the practice situation or in the training situation. There's really no excuse for not being creative and not looking to see ways. And of course, good coaches and good teachers are naturally creative, but in the practice situation, that's where really there's massive scope for creativity. Now, what about, I got onto this subject originally because where does Shrek and Star Wars, I read something about Shrek and Star Wars, and use of Shrek and Star Wars in your training. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we try to do here at New Jersey All People Equal is allow coaches and physical education teachers to understand that long-term success is where you allow people to have as much ownership into the experience as possible. So if you were going to teach a traditional soccer unit, and you were going to, hope to get to the end goal of either 5v5 or 11v11 or, some sort of, short-sighted match, you could certainly start with the traditional format of it. But if there's an individual that may be, somewhere on the autistic spectrum or somewhere in the mindset where they are much more in tune with something that's not part of soccer, for example, a movie, some other type of a character, by allowing them from the beginning to define who they want to be in the game. So if you were creating, let's say, a soccer unit for small children, and you said to them, before we start our practice and our game, please share with me who your favorite character is from Shrek. And what are the characteristics of that character? Well, one child might say, well, Shrek is a very strong character who, is able to do, strong things and massive movements. Then there's the character of Boots, who's the cat that's quick and very clever. And then there's the donkey that may do things in an unconventional way, but in the end it seems to help and work out. So by allowing those individuals to identify with really what they're either perseverating on or what they identify with more, you haven't changed the nature of the game. You might have actually helped that child release more of the skills that they naturally internally identify with. So if they are a person that sees Shrek as a character that they're interested in, they might approach their play, their movements, in large, big ways, where they're striking the ball with more power and force. Another individual might perceive that they want to be like Boots, the cat, and so they're clever, they're quickly moving behind, they're constantly dodging. So when we talked about creating programs for children who are on the autistic spectrum, or individuals who might just emphasize or perceive things in a different way, we wanted to give them the ability to say, look, whatever that child is naturally drawn to, we call this the value-based approach, whatever they value, if you can take part of that and embed that into the traditional game, you're actually going to see a greater range of motion, you're going to see a greater use of force, you're going to see more motivation, longer time on task, because they're not thinking about soccer per se, they're thinking about that character playing soccer.
I like it. It's kind of related in a way to visualization that even some elite athletes do, using visualization techniques, which is a proven technique that elite athletes often use, so they can actually visualize how they're going to perform a particular event ahead of it in their own minds and perform a certain way. I always wanted to be Bobby Charlton when I was younger. It was a famous English footballer, but never got there. The only similarity is the hairstyle. But
yeah. But that's exactly it. I mean, some people, when they originally hear some of the systems that we try and introduce, it sounds a little odd to them, but we pull back from that, and we speak about, well, let's look at the highest level. Let's identify what the elite athletes are doing. And visualization is a massive tool for individuals where they perceive themselves as thinner, as taller, as longer, as more fluid in their movement. And so in their mind, they may be visualizing themselves Or maybe they're visualizing an animal or some type of a mechanical device or some type of a nondescript thing that they really use as that extra inspiration. Well, for young children, you don't have to go that far. You actually can just start from where they are in their daily life. And the real funny thing about it is that when you begin to allow children who might be a little different, children who are differently abled, or children who are somewhere, off the traditional kind of road, you find out that there's more common links to the children who you think were on the common road. You'll see all of a sudden someone saying, well, if they can be Shrek, can I be Luke Skywalker from Star Wars? Well, why not? And so you can take all of these different genres, Harry Potter, and we're just talking about movies here. And if that's the device they need to play the game, well, then you can even expand it to where Harry Potter can say, well, if I do this motion, the defender has to freeze for 2 seconds, and that gives me a chance to steal the ball. Well, again, some people might say, well, that changes the game, but not really. If you look at how people teach in practice circumstances, there's often stoppage of play so that they can emphasize a certain scenario or a certain style or strategy that they want to take. You're just allowing them to do it in a more playful and really internalized way.
Nice, nice. And is this related to, finally I want to talk about a little bit the mixed bag approach that you have adopted as well. Is this related to the mixed bag approach to phys education?
It is. I mean, part of the mixed bag approach is saying, look, here are traditional tools that you can use. We certainly know that a soccer ball is best suited to, play soccer with. But if we decided to change that object, whether we used an empty soda bottle, whether we used a stuffed animal, whether we used something that is unconventional but was more inspirational at the moment, you might see an entirely different skill come out of it. So the mixed bag approach is saying, look, let's look at creativity as the essential key to skill enhancement. We can always scale that back. We can always put the typical traditional piece of equipment into the game. But if we allow children to practice and they develop that muscle memory with what's really most inspirational to them, then long term they're going to want to play it in a way that, best suits them. The reality is this, Peter. Traditional sports are set up for only a finite number of people to play. If you tracked 100 children who are playing soccer at the age of 5 in the same township or school system, you wouldn't see those same 100 on the varsity team many years later, partially because some might move on, they might find different interests, partially because they're no longer as skilled to be at that level. But the real truth is because there's only 15 or 16 spots. So if we know that we're, creating a glass ceiling effect for them to play traditional sports at a high school or college level, then we really need to think about the other side of the coin, which is saying, how do we let children embrace their uniqueness so that they play it long after those opportunities have expired, and it goes back to that kind of old school backyard style of play that we don't see enough of today.
Yeah, it's great stuff, Matt. We could keep talking for hours on this, and maybe we will follow it up as well with some further episodes with some specific examples, I'm thinking, in the future. But many, many thanks, Matt. I think I'm going to draw the interview to a close there. Now, I'll put a link to New Jersey All People Equal, and I encourage people to take a close look at the brilliant website that is there, and the great work that the guys do at New Jersey All People Equal. So I'll put all those links on this website as well, and please do check that out. But thanks very much, Matt. Really appreciate a little bit of your time.
Cheers, Peter, and best of luck.
Thank you.